Hello, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at. Addressing violent crime with the city's first deputy mayor of community safety, Gatewood.
A new report finds black Chicagoans are 9 times more likely to be stopped by police than white Chicagoans.
A look at the pushback over huge neighborhood musical festivals like Riot Fest.
And how a DuPage County exhibit paying tribute to Andy Warhol seeks to give the public a new perspective on the late artist.
Now to some of today's top stories. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx announces her office has dropped murder charges against a mother and son in connection with a shooting at a South Side hot dog stand. The state's attorney's office says, quote, based upon the facts, evidence, and the law, we are unable to meet our burden of proof in the prosecution of these cases. This comes less than a week after 35-year-old Carlicia Hood allegedly ordered her son to kill a man who had punched her. The incident happened at a hot dog stand on South Halsted Street. Prosecutors did not specify what evidence led them to drop the charges.
The city says it's adding 2,000 jobs to its One Summer Chicago summer employment program for youth. Teens and young adults ages 14 to 24 will be working across city departments, sister agencies, and corporate partners, with almost every city department employing youth interns, including the mayor's office. Officials say the program has met 80% of its hiring goal for nearly 23,000 young people, including a 17-year-old, Diego Rodriguez, who says this will be his second summer working as a photographer through the community-based nonprofit A Knock at Midnight.
It inspired me to create my own floral business called Dieguito's Flowers, which I used the money from this program to fund it. So without it, I would not be here.
Condolences are pouring in after the death of one of Chicago's most prominent business people and philanthropists. Representatives from the Crown family confirmed that Jim Crown was killed in a car racing accident near Aspen, Colorado. Crown was chairman and chief executive of the Henry Crown and Company investment firm and managing partner of the Aspen Skiing Company. Chicagoans might have known Crown from his myriad philanthropic roles, including Civic Committee of the Commercial Club of Chicago. And here he is with his mother, Renee Crown, who is a longtime WTTW trustee. Mayor Brandon Johnson issued a statement saying he was devastated by Crown's passing. Quote, with his generosity, Jim truly embodied the soul of Chicago. I was especially grateful for his commitment to work collaboratively with my administration to build a safer Chicago, having met recently to share ideas. And just recently this evening, President Biden weighed in with a lengthy statement that said, in part, quote, Jim represented America at its best, industrious, big-hearted, and always looking out for each other. He was a good man, a dear friend, and a great American. Jim Crown was 70 years old.
I understand the Crown was actually at the state dinner last week, and obviously he will be missed in the Chicago region.
A civic giant, and the whole Crown family, absolutely, our condolences to them.
For sure. Coming up in the program, should the Chicago Park District redirect some of the profits from major festivals back into the community?
But first, addressing the long-term root causes of crime with the city's first deputy mayor of community safety. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Within hours of taking office last month, Mayor Brandon Johnson created a new position, Deputy Mayor of Community Safety. And that person is tasked with leading efforts on an issue that was the cornerstone of Johnson's mayoral campaign, addressing the long-term root causes of crime and violence in the city. And that person is Gatewood, the city's first ever Deputy Mayor of Community Safety. He joins us now. Prior to this role, he most recently served as director of the Illinois Justice Project, a nonprofit working on criminal justice reform. Deputy Mayor, thank you for joining us. Congrats on the new position.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So why the change from Deputy Mayor Public Safety to the change from Deputy Mayor Public Safety to Community Safety, which was the title of the role under Mayor Lightfoot?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. Mayor Johnson wanted to take a different approach, right? We've taken this approach to public safety, and we wanted to take a comprehensive approach to community safety, meaning we wanted to have more input from community on how we build our long-term community safety strategies and partnership. As you've seen through other time frames, people who were in this position were kind of cycled throughout. We wanted to have a more comprehensive approach to this work and do it in a partnership and collaboration led by community.
How will you manage your success in this role? Is there a tangible numbers or actions that you'll look to say, this is what's working for me?
Well, I would say this. I think how we impact people in the city of Chicago, right? I don't want to base success off numbers, because when we think about numbers, we're talking about people. We're talking about the people in the city. So we really want to think about how we make long-term investments in the citizens of Chicago, how we talk with community, how we engage with community and actually hear what people need, and how we really start to address those root causes by taking a full force of government approach, by giving the resources that are needed in those communities.
How does all that look? What does it look like? And how will you be addressing public safety differently from what we've seen previously?
Sure. So you'll see us out a lot more as we continue to build our team, our community safety team overall. We're going to be in places all over the city, not only having conversations, but really bringing in folks for real detailed discussions on how they view community safety, what the resources that are needed. And again, like I said earlier, how do we take that full of government approach? Meaning, it's not just around what happens in violence, it also means what are we doing to improve the quality of life in particular communities? How do we make sure we provide those resources? How do we work collaboratively with sister agencies, our partners in the community, our partners in business, our partners in philanthropy? How do we pull everybody together to the table so we can have a comprehensive approach to the things that we've seen throughout the city?
You know, based on your experience, what have you seen that actually works to reduce crime and violence?
Well, I think we have to invest in people. Right? I think there's a multiple layer approach, right? It's not a one size fits all. It's not a one answer to this. So we can invest in people, and at the same time, we can work along with the law enforcement community as well as the community violence intervention community and young folks, right? So how do we pull all of these resources together, again, to really start targeting areas that are in the most dire need in the city?
Of course, as we know, summer, we're in it, right? And that is usually when we see more violence. 4th of July weekend is this weekend and into next week. What should the city be doing to address crime, especially gun violence, you know, during the summer months?
Well, we have to, one, continue to work together collaboratively. Two, continue to activate safe spaces around the city, meaning we have to listen to our youth, we have to provide the resources that are needed to create and activate those safe spaces, and also we have to be thoughtful around how we deploy our resources. And when I say deploy resources, I don't just mean how we deploy law enforcement. You know, how do we deploy our peacekeepers? How do we deploy our CVI workers? How do we, again, deploy the resources that are needed in youth organizations and organizations around the city? And how do we do that collaboratively with law enforcement? How do we do all of this together under the same umbrella?
You were right behind Mayor Johnson at today's One Summer Chicago kickoff event. There were nearly 2 applicants for every job in the program. How does the city address that unmet need and sort of use jobs as a vehicle to, like you said, improve quality of life, reduce violence?
Yeah, so jobs are one big mechanism to reducing violence. How we address that need is we continue to grow the areas in which we can give jobs to folks. Not only giving jobs through our sister agencies throughout the city, but again, this goes back to the point earlier on how we collaborate, right? You saw a lot of the business community there, Amazon, you saw the Cubs, you saw the Chamber. So how do we continue to work with folks, not just for summer jobs, but how do we think about those long-term year-round jobs and also the jobs that lead to a longer-term career trajectory? We want to be thoughtful and intentional about this and continue those relationships, right? People are hungry for jobs. The business community is hungry to give jobs as well as the government. So we have to work together in collaboration.
Of course, the search is on for the city's next police superintendent. How do you think your work will fit into what the Chicago Police Department does, and how do you plan on working with them?
We plan on being very collaborative, right? We plan on being supportive. We plan on being collaborative. And we also understand that we didn't get to this problem where we are alone, and we won't get out of these problems that we see in the city alone. So we'll work in great collaboration.
Of course, you're leading, as you've mentioned, cross-government efforts to address this issue. You know, what other agencies, what other institutions outside of city agencies are responsible for this, for community safety?
Oh gosh, all of us, right? As we sit here, if you are in the city of Chicago, we're all responsible for community safety. One thing that often comes up when people say, hey, you took a big job. What I always say is we took a big job, right? Because we're all responsible for community safety. Everything we do, education, healthcare, economics. All things lead back to that role of feeling safe, being safe, and actually creating that safety. So it's not just what we can do in city government, it's also what we can do across the board. And again, this is why we're taking a collaborative approach, not just with the full force of government, but the full force of community and our different partners around the table.
What are the obstacles, major obstacles you can foresee? What are your challenges going to be?
Who knows, right? We'll see. Obviously, we see a lot of challenges with the levels of violence in the city, but also we have to understand that we cannot base success solely on violence. We have to approach this from a different perspective. We have to address the violence, but also while addressing the systemic disinvestment that we've seen as well. So we have to do both of those. It's not an or, it's an and.
And obviously, there's going to be a financial component along the way, right? What kind of financial investment is going to be necessary to make an impact?
Well, we'll see, right? These are the conversations that we'll have with our community partners so we can get a better sense of what those investments that are needed. And then we'll be able to really address that later on down the line. We want our investments to reflect the needs of the people in the city, and that's what they will do.
Okay, Gary and Gatewood, 3 weeks on the job as Deputy Mayor of Public Safety, Community Safety. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, thank you.
Of course. And a programming note, starting next week and through the months of July and August, we'll be devoting our entire program every Monday evening to issues of community safety, crime, and violence. We'll be looking at both the problems and possible solutions. More details to come, but of course, be sure to tune in Monday nights for this special WTTW News programming. Paris.
Brandis, Black Chicagoans were 9 times more likely to be stopped by police than white Chicagoans in 2018 and 2019. But at the same time, officers were 29% more likely to find drugs or weapons if they searched someone who was white. This data comes from a new report by the team overseeing court-ordered reforms of the Chicago Police Department. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. All right, so Heather, let's dig into this report. It examined around 300,000 stops and searches by Chicago police officers 2 years before COVID. What did it find?
Well, not only were black people more likely to be stopped by Chicago police, Latino Chicagoans were 3 times more likely to be stopped than white Chicagoans. And in all cases, these stops and searches were not really effective in finding weapons. In only 4% of most cases were guns recovered. And that meant that Chicago police officers were coming in contact with people under tense circumstances, sometimes allowing for there to be tension and sometimes use of force.
This practice, also known as stop and frisk elsewhere around the country. Do we know why Black and Latino Chicagoans were stopped so much more frequently than white Chicagoans?
Well, the independent monitor, Maggie Hickey, overseeing these reforms, asked the Chicago Police Department to explain this disparity, and they did not. They offered no substantive reason for this disparity. I also asked the police department for a response. Instead, they offered a statement welcoming additional oversight on the use of stops and searches.
So the overall amount of stops and searches have gone down in recent years, but at the same time, the number of traffic stops has increased. Is there a connection here?
That's right. So in 2015, the police department agreed to change the way it stopped and searched people as part of an agreement with the ACLU of Illinois. At the same time that agreement went into effect, traffic stops surged. And both the ACLU and the independent monitoring team thinks there's a link between those, and they want the police department to explain why.
How does this impact the overall consent decree process? We know this has been a push and pull for many years now to get the CPD under compliance.
Well, this issue is now under the oversight of the federal judge overseeing this case, which means that now the police department will be even further behind because there are essentially more tasks on their to-do list. When Mayor Brandon Johnson took office just about 6 weeks ago, the department had only fully complied with 3% of the tasks.
All right, Heather Sharon, thanks very much.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. The music is flowing in Chicago parks this summer, but for some communities that brings dread. Noise, trash, the loss of the park for days or weeks for locals. Some of the biggest music fests of the summer include Riot Fest, 3 days in Douglas Park, Pitchfork for 3 days in Union Park, Reset for 3 days in Reese Park, And of course, Lollapalooza for 4 days in Grant Park, which is also being severely restricted by the NASCAR race this summer. I ever heard of it? The NASCAR race in Grant Park. And there's also pushback against the Chicago Park District for not redirecting some profits directly back to those specific parks. One West Side lawmaker now wants big concerts like Riot Fest to add a 2% community benefits tax. And here to talk about that and more are State Representative LaShawn Ford, who represents Lawndale, where Riot Fest is located, and Juanita Irizarry, president of Friends of the Parks. The Chicago Park District declined our invitation to participate tonight. First, Representative Ford, so you're calling on 2% to be diverted into the park where a festival is being held. So let's say Riot Fest, the profits there, 2% would have to go to Douglas Park. How would that all work?
Well, actually, it would not go into the city, but it would go directly to a non-for-profit that's in Lawndale, and not putting it in the city coffers. And you know, the community, they don't want it to go into the city and the city use it for the parks. They want to use the money for things like homelessness and allowing children to go to the park to take the classes that are actually at the park.
So are you saying that community residents should be in this nonprofit and they should kind of decide how the money's spent?
That's right.
Juanita Irizarry, what are the top complaints you hear from residents, say in Reese Park, where this Reset Festival was happening this weekend, or Douglas Park?
Well, there are often not enough conversations with community to fully understand how the community is going to be negatively impacted. In Reese Park, for example, Fullerton is under construction right now. It's already down to one lane either way. It's hard to get around, and then on top of that, you're going to put all this extra activity because of this concert. It also tramples the fields where kids are going to play or natural areas, and so people get upset that some part of their park is not going to be available to them, even if it's being fixed after the concert.
It really seems like with so many of these festivals and concerts, they're kind of set in stone before the community even knows about it or has a chance to weigh in. Do you believe voices are being heard enough?
I don't think so, because when you think about it, when the Riot Fest came from Humboldt Park, the community automatically spoke against it. You know, and I'm all for the joyous occasions of festivals, but communities should have a say in the enjoyment of their neighborhoods.
Juanita Irizarry, in response to this, the Chicago Park District enacted a new rule that for these big festivals that Park District commissioners would have to sign off. But they signed off a couple weeks ago on Riot Fest and Reset when the tickets had already been sold, the bands had already been booked. So does that sound very transparent to you?
Yeah, the community had actually told us to stop celebrating even a little victory of getting the Board of Commissioners involved, because they figured it was just going to be a rubber stamp process, that they really were going to get these permits regardless. And so we think, though there maybe were a few more goodies that the community got as a result of this process this year, the Park District still has a bit of thinking to do about how to make it a process that is not really just a rubber stamp.
And let's hear what one of those Park District commissioners said recently in approving the Riot Fest permit.
So in addition to looking to you, Riot Fest, to meet every single promise and commitment that you have made, we're also looking to you to lean in a deep way, as you've been doing with all community members.
And the Park District also released this statement to us tonight. The Chicago Park District remains committed to balancing the needs of children and families who rely on our parks and welcoming world-class cultural events and experiences to our neighborhoods. These events contribute greatly to the rich cultural landscape of our city, but also generate $20 million annually in revenue that directly supports vital park projects and programming. What about that, Representative Ford? Do you think there is enough money coming from these events that do go back to the parks or go back to vital programming in the city?
You know, I think that the parks, if they're satisfied with $20 million, the truth is this is a business, and it's not a non-for-profit that's putting on these concerts. They're going to leave with hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a profit. They should want to help those communities that's disadvantaged, and therefore the for-profit should help, or some way the community should benefit when they lose their quiet enjoyment.
Juanita Irizarry, are all festivals the same here? Are there some festivals that perhaps do fit in neighborhood parks, whereas others maybe don't?
Yeah, we always say that these concerts are contextual, and sometimes there's a chosen few picnic in your neighborhood that is really cool and nobody complains about. Or
That's the house music
that's
one.
the house music one. Or the Michelada Fest started in Pilsen and came out of the community, but it got too big for the park that hosts it. And so sometimes that cultural relevance goes well with the neighborhood, but still you need a bigger site than what that particular park affords.
And I think, the city does welcome the revenue that comes from these events, tourism, folks coming in from out of town. What do you think is a better way to perhaps hold all of these festivals and not disrupt community members?
Yeah, I think that we all agree, as we were talking, that we should probably have a site where it's constructed and people all agree that this is the site that people will go to in the summer. And I think that would be much agreed to by the city of Chicago.
I know how you feel about that, Juanita Irizarry, and I know where you think that site should be, right? Especially if the Bears leave Soldier Field, right along the lakefront there would be a perfect spot. Any traction to that idea, like Summerfest in Milwaukee, to have a permanent site where perhaps all of these festivals could go, because there's so many of them.
We do think that if the Bears really do leave, there's real potential for more concerts at Soldier Field and in the surrounding parking lots. It may be yet that there's a longer term view towards some other location that will really be our kind of Summerfest site, but the Chicago Park District could really generate a lot more revenue with concerts and other events held at Soldier Field if the Bears leave.
Is there any buy-in on that idea from any public officials that you've talked to?
Absolutely. The neighbors across the street would be concerned about a lot of traffic.
That is, there are people that live in that neighborhood too, we should stipulate.
Yes, absolutely. But under the right conditions with more public transit and other things, I think there are definitely folks within the Park District and elsewhere in the city that would want to look at that.
Ongoing discussion, but in the meantime, everybody go have fun and be safe at these festivals. State Representative LaShawn Ford and Juanita Irizarry, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Paris.
And up next, we take you inside a new Andy Warhol exhibit. But first, a look at the weather.
An exhibit in DuPage County is paying tribute to the late, great pop artist Andy Warhol. The intimate showcase aims to provide a deeper context for the famed pop artist's life. Arts correspondent Angel Edo takes us inside the Cleve Carney Museum of Art.
Repeated prints in vibrant colors, Studio 54, and personal photographs. These are just some of the elements included in a one-of-a-kind exhibition honoring the late, great Andy Warhol.
Andy Warhol's personal life, that was always kind of hidden. We have photos from that personal life from people close to him, different connections. I think anytime we can humanize someone like Warhol that is like this mythic character, I think it is important and valuable because then you make that real connection to them.
Now on display at the Mack Art Center, the exhibition was born from a personal collection of more than 150 of Warhol's portraits, known as the Andy Warhol Photographic Legacy Project.
This exhibit of photos called Andy Warhol Visual Diary gives hints at his process, right? You see the number of different photos he took before he decided one he would make a print or a painting out of.
Now, with more than 200 Warhol pieces ranging from silk screens to some of his more recognizable prints, curator Justin Whitty hopes this exhibition provides a different perspective to the creative that started as a commercial artist.
He was always very aware of how he could use his presence or his personality to help gain attention and to be at the forefront of different movements. He was not born into affluence. He was born to a working class immigrant family in industrial Pittsburgh in 1928. And he learned early on the importance of working really hard and how to make sure that he didn't lose a lot of the things he earned in life. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
A lot of Warhol's influence is said to come as a result of losing his father at a young age and how that impacted his view of life and death. It's a major theme seen throughout his work.
You see throughout his work, there is an understanding of mortality and kind of immortality wrapped together. So we often think about the soup cans or the Brillo boxes, elevating the everyday. But he also did Marilyn, And when you think about that in context of the soup cans, it's like, well, we also create celebrity and we sell that as a product. But he also did pieces like the electric chair or car crash or pieces from Death and Disaster, saying we also sell tragedy. And we sell them all on the same level, all as entertainment to be consumed. People maybe sometimes think of Warhol in a simplistic manner, but he was reflecting our culture in a lot of complex ways that he doesn't always get credit for. And I want to make sure people who come to the show start to have a better understanding of that.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
The Andy Warhol Portfolios, a Life in Pop exhibition, continues through September 10th at the Cleve Carney Museum of Art in Glen Ellen. That's part of the McAninch Arts Center at College of DuPage. And that's our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now for Paris Schutz and all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 18 attorneys selected for the 2023 Super Lawyers List.